13 years ago, Steve Jobs announced this, the original iPhone, and the world has never been the same.
This is a day I've been looking forward to for 2.5 years.
January 2007, Macworld at the Moscone Center in San Francisco, California. This is where the world changed forever. Steve Jobs walked out on stage and announced the original iPhone, but more importantly, promised that they could actually do it. Nowadays, the annual iPhone announcement is an expected event. We know it's gonna happen every year. Sometimes we're recycling parts and designs from previous years. Apple is a well-oiled machine at building iPhones, but that was not the case in 2007. In fact, this iPhone almost didn't even exist. Even though Apple had been developing the iPhone for 2.5 years, by the time Jobs took the stage in January 2007, they weren't even close. They had a little more than a dozen working prototypes at the time, and working is a bit of an exaggeration. Those early prototypes were so fragile that every time they wanted to test a new one, they had to send executives to China to pick up the phones in person and bring them back in their carry-on luggage because they were too fragile to be shipped without breaking. So it's just short of a miracle that 6 months later, on June 29th, 2007, this iPhone was available in stores. Now, when I say this iPhone, I really do mean this iPhone. This is pretty much one of the earliest iPhones that you could find. No doubt some of you eagle-eyed viewers have already noticed that this is not a sealed, unopened iPhone. I'm not willing to spend $20,000 on a brand new original iPhone, only to then ruin all of that value by unboxing it for you today. But this is a pretty special iPhone because this is one of the earliest ones ever. The way you can tell this is a really early iPhone is there's no iTunes logo on the screen, and we still have the old SMS text icon rather than messages. This is the original iPhone OS 1.0 earliest version. You'll notice on the side here, this is the 4GB model. Now that's significant because the original iPhone came at launch in two different configurations. There was this 4GB model for $500 and the 8GB model for $600. But the 4GB one did not last very long. It was discontinued in September, which means that these are a lot more rare than the 8GB and later 16GB models that were sold through 2008 through the launch of the iPhone 3G. Now specifically the serial number for this one dates it back to the second week of July 2007, which means this was made just 2 weeks after the original launch of the iPhone. So without any further ado, let's see what's in the box. And there it is. Genesis, the start of the modern age.
An iPod, a phone. Are you getting it? These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device.
As we usually do, let's set aside the phone for now. We will come back to that in a little bit. And let's see what else we get in the box. I first of all have to say, this is a very solid little insert here. This is a pretty thick piece of plastic. Now underneath that we have our usual documentation, or I guess not usual, because this is what it's all based off of. And under that, look at that. You might not know that, but the original iPhone actually came with a dock connector in the box. This thing is actually pretty cool. In addition to obviously being a dock that you can plug your phone into, it also has a line out on the back so you could plug a speaker into it. It even has little speaker holes that match up with the holes on the bottom of the iPhone itself so that you can still use the internal speakers when it's in the dock. Personally, I'm not convinced that the little holes in the pass-through under here are going to be enough to really get that sound through, so we'll have to test that out. Additionally, in here we get our power brick, as you would imagine, and our 30-pin connector. And oh yes, here we have the early version of these earpods. They weren't called earpods, I think they were just called Apple headphones. But you can see, because of this connector here, that these are the early ones. This was actually a point of controversy with the original iPhone because they used this recessed headphone jack, so you could only really plug in genuine Apple headphones, and people were really mad about that. Now, I'm not going to unwrap these accessories because obviously they're original, they're wrapped. We're just going to preserve those as much as we can. What I do want to take a look at is the documentation. Specifically, these early iPhones came with a microfiber cloth, and I will die if this one has that cloth. Let's see. So there we have our fingertips. Underneath that, we have some information, our Apple stickers, and the microfiber cloth. Look at that, it even has iPhone embossed on the front. Man, I don't know if this is rare or special, but it's really cool that we have absolutely everything here. I even like how you can tell that these are old style Apple stickers because they're slanted. They're not straight up and down like they are today. What's cool about the pamphlet for this original iPhone is, well, for one, it's actually quite big, and this is pretty much every single piece of information, every single thing that you could do with this original iPhone. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this iPhone isn't brand new. It has been activated, it has been used, it's not in perfect condition, but I have to say, I'm very impressed with the condition. Apart from this little scratch over here, it's really not bad at all for an all original phone. Let's go ahead and power it on, and we'll take a look at the features of iPhone OS 1.0. Ooh, there it is. There's not a lot to look at here. First of all, we don't have an app store, we don't have iTunes, there's no way to change the background, you can't even swipe around, we can't even hold down to rearrange applications. This is a very, very bare bones operating system. These 16 apps were all you got. That's it. We can't swipe up from the top or the bottom. There's no double click to do app switching. You can basically only have one app open at a time. You can see here, once I load up the settings app, if I go out of that, open up the calendar, once that loads in, I can go back to settings, and look at that, it has to reload. It pretty much only has enough RAM to run whatever the current application is, and then you press home and it kills it. If you go into the camera app, you can see that this is quite literally a camera app. There is a button that you press, and it takes a photograph, and that is all. There's no tap to focus, we can't zoom in, there's no video, it is literally a camera. Despite the apparent lack of functionality though, you cannot deny that this thing was revolutionary, even just the fundamental way that we interact with our smartphone. For example, if I go into a web browser here and I pull up the keyboard, love those sounds. When Apple was working on this keyboard, they had a really tough time getting this small on-screen keyboard to feel natural and not be riddled with errors when you were typing. So it actually has a pretty rudimentary form of typing prediction. Whenever you press a letter, it knows what letters are most likely to come next, and the hitboxes for those letters, oftentimes vowels and stuff like that, become larger, therefore easier to type on. Even simple things, like if I take a picture of this lamp right over here, and then go into the Photos application where we can view said photo of the lamp, you can see we can zoom in and we can use our finger to scroll around. Just that functionality, being able to zoom in and out, was revolutionary.
And we have invented a new technology called multi-touch, which is phenomenal. It works like magic. You can do multi-finger gestures on it, and boy, have we patented it.
Now, the most recent version of iPhone OS that you could run on this thing was 3.1.3, so it got dropped relatively quickly. But this one, obviously, as I mentioned, is running iPhone OS 1.0. Now, certain earlier iPhones can actually be downgraded to the original version of iPhone OS. I'll have a tutorial linked in the description below, but only certain original 2G iPhones can do that. And the way that you can tell is by looking at the serial number. If the first and third numbers are 7, and the third and fourth add up to less than 48, then your phone shipped with iPhone OS 1.0 and can be downgraded. Later ones, like the 16 gigabyte models, you can't downgrade those. So unfortunately, you won't be able to use the original pre-App Store, pre-everything version of iPhone OS. So before we wrap up this video, I do want to test out how the audio sounds using this dock here. So let's play some good old-fashioned marimba. That's a classic sound. And now we'll put it in the dock and we'll try it again. That's actually pretty impressive. It doesn't sound worse. Well done. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, this wasn't a brand new unboxing. This wasn't as cool as some of the other videos I'm sure you guys have seen, but I personally like to interact with a piece of history like this, so I wasn't interested in the great expense and emotional cost of potentially ruining the value of an unopened original iPhone. I'm pretty happy with this, and as you can imagine, this will be making an appearance in more videos in the future. So of course, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on to see that upcoming video. Let me know what you think about the original iPhone in the comments below, and as usual, don't forget to like and subscribe. Please consider following me on Twitter at Luke Miani, and my subreddit is linked in the description below if you want to check that out. And with that, I will see you all in the next video.